Hi, everyone. This is Jackie Cooper with J Cooper Travels, Crypto Mom 2, and Love Travel Scotland. I want to welcome everyone back to our talk shows. I also want to thank everyone for liking and subscribing. I have some wonderful conversations, including the one today that I will be dropping shortly. And I want to make sure that you're all in the loop so that way you can stay current, both about events, places to go, and activities to take part in. So today I have a very special guest, Meredith Stein, and she is an author, but she's more than that. She's a visionary and very knowledgeable about multiple topics. So we're going to be talking about her book, but we're going to be kind of chatting a few different things. And I'm going to have her introduce herself in a quick second. Before I do that, for those that are new to my talk shows, I want to welcome you. My background is that I'm an attorney. I'm also an educator in the special education field. And I'm also an author as well as a blockchain enthusiast and a traveler and so many other things. I have gotten involved with a lot of different projects because of my personal interests. And one of the things that I have found is that this is a very small global community. And the more that I network with people and talk to people, I find that we all have common interests, but we can all share and learn from each other. And I've learned a lot by just talking with Meredith. So I'm very excited to have her on the show so she can also help you and your understanding of cloud governance and a lot of other technical terms and things that, again, I had no clue until I started speaking to her. So Meredith, how are you doing today?
Well, Jackie, thank you so much. It's such a privilege to be here. I love being mutual fans of smart women. So your work and resources have certainly helped me raise my awareness about crypto. And I'm just wonderful to be here to chat with you today.
Yeah, I know that you're a certified public accountant and you also are an executive with over 20 years of experience. Your career has kind of gone over a variety of areas from governance to risk and compliance. Why don't you tell us a little bit more about how you got involved with all this? Because I don't often find women involved in these areas. So I was very excited to be chatting with you. So why don't you share a little bit more about how you kind of dived into this?
Sure. And yes, women in tech is such an important
Yeah.
way for us to be part of that industry. And you and I have both gone on our own journeys becoming authors. And I was somehow the stars are aligned that we got published. My co-authors and I we're working with DeGrooter Publishing, which is a fairly established, I think it was established in 1749, and De Gruyter is an international academic publisher. And so the audience for our book, there's a wide audience for the book, but it started off with thinking that we were writing the book for boards of directors. And my background in audit and governance have always sort of had that lens of, from an oversight perspective, what should leaders be thinking about in the way of risk and compliance. And so I got connected with my co-author, Dr. Stephen Mezzio, who is a professor, a clinical professor at Pace University and an executive director for their sustainability school. And he and I started writing an article on the topic of cloud in 2020 before the COVID lockdown. And we got published that summer. And Steve had the great idea to say, "Hey, let's write a book about this. Each chapter can sort of be its own like an own standalone article." And the excitement just grew from there, and we were able to get connected with a publisher. And now our book is published on Amazon and by DeGrooter Publishing, available for purchase at any time. Really excited about it. And when I think about the professors, it's called Professors of Practice series, and it's the first in the series by DeGrooter Publishing. But the idea, sort of get it, I was so happy to be introduced to you because our mutual friend, Stacy Linderman of A6 Business and Operational Optimization, she introduced me to you. And she explained what a wonderful person you are and how you are a lifelong learner, and Stacy is as well. The idea that you're trying to help raise literacy and raise awareness about crypto. Similar concept here is that my authors and I are trying to raise awareness about the importance of cloud governance, and certainly discussing some powerful topics. When I just tie it together with the crypto piece, I think blockchains become synonymous with cryptocurrencies, and I think the cloud can push the execution of some blockchain technologies. And there's also blockchain cloud storage solutions and ways that the cloud breaks up the data, encrypts it, adding that extra layer of security, and then distributes it through a network. So I think some some people I've heard say that blockchain's a new and possibly cheaper way to perform cloud storage. Well, we'll get back to some of these, some of the risks that we discuss in the book. But the way you and I got connected, I think that the tie-in is that we both want to raise literacy in different topics. So that's the goal, certainly. But we bring my co-authors and I each bring some vertical skills and perspectives with industry specializations. I'm in healthcare. Steve has some deep governance insights as well as organizational change, human capital, learning. And our co-author, Vince, he brought some deep cloud technical skills and experience to the table.
So I love everything that you're saying. For those that are on the visual side, you're going to see that I've hopped over to Amazon. So that way you can find the cloud governance book and just, put in the title name and either Meredith Stein's name or Stephen Mezzio's name, and the book will come up. For those that are on the audio side, I will also be giving the link within my blog. So that way, again, don't worry if you don't have paper and pen. I'll definitely make sure that you have access to, the link. So you've mentioned a lot of things, which are just great. I know that there might be some newbies here. So explain what cloud governance means, in maybe the simplest of terms, and then we'll build on it because there's a lot of use cases. But, just like, and thank you for mentioning that, about the fact that I'm also an author of the Bitcoin Cinderella. And the reason why I wrote that book is there's always vocabulary and in any field. And it gets very confusing when you hear terms and you just don't know where to go to kind of break it out. So in your area, cloud governance and working with corporations and individuals who have a need to know, they might know, but if someone's new, what does that actually mean or look like?
You are 100% on board. The book, it's a basics book. It's a reference guide, and it has, just like you said, definitions and explanations of complex jargon. Because just like crypto, the cloud governance is a complicated topic, and some people, could become fearful about what they think could be complex, but it's just clouded with some jargon. So we spent a substantial amount of time researching and discussing how to best define cloud governance, and the terms are independent of each other, and they're each in their own complex domain. So the cloud and then corporate governance, and we're trying to help the reader understand the impact of the cloud on many governance functions. And when I say governance functions, I'm talking about the boards of directors, internal audit, cybersecurity, incident response, risk assessment, third-party assurance. So we present a compilation of cloud governance definitions, and we landed on one for the foundation of the book. And it's another woman in technology, Dr. Thorasium she works at the University of Texas at Dallas, and we landed on her definition, a role model in cybersecurity and helping minority women gain some insights and opportunities in the cyberspace. So we landed on her definition as the foundation for the book, and it anchored on two parts that are important. The first is it's IT related, And the second part is business focused. And I would say that this is more, if I was to say like who's the audience for the book, it would land more on the business side than the technology side. And we have some really great questions at the end of each chapter that would appeal to management of corporations, small to medium-sized businesses, boards of directors, consultants, auditors, students, faculty, consultants would also be a big one. And so the IT part of the definition of cloud governance talks about accountability and decision making. And it's about bringing value, a balance between value, risk, and resources. The business part is focused on the investment and control of the cloud. So the definition itself informs the creation of our cloud governance business process ecosystem. And I think that seems to be the buzzword for the end of 2022 and the beginning of 2023. So in the book, we put together an ecosystem to help break down some of those complex topics, domains, and that jargon that you spoke of.
So why would a company or an individual, because companies are made up of individuals, why would an individual need to know some of the questions and the answers that you're raising in the book? What are the concerns that they might be asking and they don't even realize that they need to reach out to you? What kind of problem can you help solve?
Yeah, so the cloud stresses an organization's governance in a number of ways. And first, it extends the enterprise, right? The third-party cloud service provider goes outside of the organization. And the cloud brings new opportunities for innovation, which we've seen. And at the same time, it exasperates existing risks and creates some new risks. And we have in the book a cloud risk analysis that I think would be really a helpful resource to people. So to name a few cloud risks, you have some misconfigurations, the big one on failure to control some cloud expenses, a very limited amount of due diligence before starting a contract relationship with a cloud service provider, non-compliance with the many data privacy laws, not just within the United States, but abroad, such as the European Union and the GDPR. And a big thing that we discovered was that lack of skills and experience to basically execute any sort of cloud strategy. So there's definitely some new skill sets that an organization would need in order to implement cloud computing at their organization. So I would say that in the idea of that ecosystem, that an organization has to adapt, and if it doesn't, then it can't be resilient. So it's not just about, it's not just the OCIO taking care, the CIO office taking care of this particular issue, right? This is the idea of resilience for the entire organization. And in order to, have that resiliency, you have to think about risk and the proper governance in place.
Well, there were a few things that came to mind while you were talking. We think about companies, websites, other ways that we might project our image online, and we think of it in the isolation part of it, and then we think of it, from the customer perspective. But, you brought up the idea of just the legality of communication across borders, because again, anytime you put something on the internet for a corporation, and you are communicating into a different country, there are different rules and regulations that you need to be aware of. So that's definitely an area of challenge, because how does everyone find out what they should do or should not do and stay in compliance? Because I know in the blockchain side, at the very least, things are evolving and changing all the time. So in the traditional business side, or the area that you're working with, how can you make sure that you're in compliance? How do you help them?
Yes, and we have a very large chapter discussing just that, the security the compliance because of the many rules and regulations. And like you said, there's even some emerging ones, right? That the companies are trying to chase the regulation and make sure that if they're doing business in one country, that they're making sure that they're compliant with all of the places that they do business. And because cloud service providers have their servers in different countries, that data is crossing organizational boundaries and country boundaries. So you absolutely have to be aware and ask management, what are we thinking about this? Like, what happens if data transfers, and what happens if, the disposition of the data, how are we making sure that it's disposed and destroyed of properly? Like I said, it exasperates some risks and creates some new ones. So having the dialogue first would be the idea, right? Like making sure that people are aware. One of the, if I could call to action something for the listeners, would
Yeah.
be asking the organization if they have, a quote unquote inventory of all their cloud service providers and services. Most of the time, an organization is unaware what services they have floating around in the cloud, and that means that they don't know where their data is. So I would say the first stop would be to, if you don't have an inventory of the cloud services and the providers that are providing those services, then you start making one, because you can't protect what you don't know.
No, while you were talking, I was thinking to myself, there's a few different questions popped into my mind, is not just where your cloud services are being held, but then the other question, and you might address it in the book, what happens if that cloud service provider, either goes out of business? So what happens to your information? Two, what happens if they get hacked? What happens to your business? And, again, do you have a backup? And where and how is that backup there? So there was that whole line of thought that I want you to, maybe hop on. But then the other thing I was thinking, just as a person, an individual, we also have, various cloud providers that our personal information is on. And so if we are within a company structure and we're also doing personal activities, then that brings up a whole nother line of questions, in terms of protection for the company that I'm in. But if I'm doing personal emails out and whatever, that might open up another area of risk, because all of a sudden it's like opening up a door that maybe wasn't protected before. So what answers do you have, or how does the book address that? Or can people contact you if they need consulting? All that.
You so smart, Jackie. You raised some excellent points, and yes, there are certain actions and repercussions if a cloud service provider gets hacked. Or most of the time, when I first spoke about the litany of risks that we explore, cloud misconfigurations is the top risk. And you know what? That's not the cloud service provider's fault. That's the organization's fault. So, the cloud service providers are responsible for making sure that the infrastructure and, their servers are secure, but the organization is responsible for making sure their data is secure. And so, there are, this is what happens with, spiraling the cloud costs, right? So you have maybe another consultant in addition to the cloud service provider helping to manage your services, so they understand how to read the cloud service provider incident reports or the bills, because the invoices are just as confusing, like a cell phone bill. Can you imagine having that for an entire company? There's a case that we examine in here with an organization that went about, I think, $90 million over their cloud budget in 1 year. And so clearly there were some cloud costs and financial governance functions that were lacking. And, when we talk about the idea that what happens to an organization if their cloud data is breached, we talk about that in the book as well. And what does that mean for the board of directors? was the cloud discussed at board meetings? And was that breach discussed at a board meeting? And what, the board members have a fiduciary responsibility to be careful with understanding the business of the organization. So did the organization take too long to discuss and disclose that significant cloud breach? We're seeing some director and officer liability lawsuits come in and say, stakeholders and people whose data were breached, basically suing, having a lawsuit against the board of directors to say you were deficient in your duties in performing oversight of management and you let this breach happen. So there's a lot going on to unpack in that and the questions that you raised, and organizations are still learning, and it's hard to keep pace because the cyber threats are happening all the time. And again, it gets back to being able to have that inventory so you know what you're protecting. There's a big part of our book that talks about democratized employees, and I'm sure you're familiar with that term, where it's those employees outside of the centralized IT function that are engaging in procuring their own for the good of the organization, but they're just going ahead and procuring it outside of the centralized IT function. And that IT function doesn't understand that exists. And what access does that cloud activity have on the company's network? So exposing even more security risks.
So I know that the book might talk about traditional businesses, but while you were talking and, about liability, board of directors, things like that, what popped into my mind from the blockchain world was the FTX situation. That, again, everything that happened with FTX, to me is not a surprise. It's only because how do I say this? It's not a reflection on the blockchain world. It's a reflection on how businesses are handled or mishandled. And, and it can happen in any business, whether it's a blockchain business or brick and mortar business. But I think that these are important questions that, need to be asked and answered, because you're right, there is liability when a discussion happens and then nothing gets done. Or when there's an awareness of things that might be happening. And, again, it's very complex. So I'm grateful that you wrote the book. I'm sure it's going to raise more questions than maybe the answers exist.
There are questions today and maybe answers tomorrow, or maybe just more questions. You raised FTX as an example. That had, I don't believe, anything to do with crypto. It was all about their lack of governance, lack of internal controls, and human behaviors went awry, and there was greed.
Yeah.
It didn't have to do with anything with crypto. It was just poor governance.
Yeah, exactly. Moving funds from one to another, and not having the liquidity and not having the controls in place, and just a lot of things. So I know that people are going to want to reach out to you. What's the best way for them to reach out to you so that way they can ask questions of you and you can support them?
Yes, you can connect with me on LinkedIn at Meredith Stein. What I love your listeners to remember is you definitely don't need to be a technology specialist in cloud or crypto, blockchain, what have you, to understand that there's definitely some corporate governance implications on cloud computing. So research confirmed there's a lot of confusion. You're not alone. And we offer that the book and the questions that we pose will help hopefully raise your cloud literacy for the future.
I think everyone needs to be thinking about getting the book, just because even if it's not something that you normally would read, it's important for us to step out of our comfort zone to understand the language, because eventually we're going to be encountering the terms, and we might have someone that's going to be asking us these questions. And we might not be experts in this area. And myself, I'm talking about me. Meredith obviously is. But again, it's the type of thing that you need to be able to share what resources that they can go to. So, adding this book to your personal or business library is really important. And so I'm really glad that you wrote it. Are you thinking about writing a second book?
I am. Steve Nazio and I are partnering with another person. We're thinking about writing another book about corporate governance. So again, trying to go a little bit level higher than the specific cloud governance. I know that you too are interested in writing another book, and it's an exciting journey. And I wish you all the best, Jackie. This was wonderful. Thanks for hosting.
Yeah, thank you. The first book, The Bitcoin Cinderella, is the foundation of the adventure series for Samantha, who's trying to find her mom in this blockchain adventure. The second book that I'm writing is called The Bitcoin Cinderella and the Seven Dwarves, and it's all about Bitcoin mining, and that's where she meets her cousin Snow White. So I'm using fairy tales to integrate the educational terminology, and also kind of use that format to make it fun for everyone who's reading, but there'll be QR codes to educational platforms that will be online as well. So thank you.
Brilliant.
Yeah, thank you for mentioning that. So for everyone that is on, as I always say, be kind to yourself, be kind to others. We're all so interconnected. We're all part of one world. And definitely, if you've been listening, I will have Meredith's contact information in the blog below, along with where you can get the book on Amazon. And I appreciate everyone being on. Thank you, and have a great day. And thank you so much, Meredith, for being on.
Thank you, Jackie. Take care.
Thank you.